All right, National College Football Roundup, Big 12 preseason poll. Now, it came out last week, but we haven't had a chance to talk about it. Texas, the preseason favorite, followed by Kansas State at 2. Oklahoma checks in at 3. Texas Tech at 4. TCU at 5. Baylor at 6. Oklahoma State at 7. UCF at 8. Kansas at 9. Iowa State at 10. BYU at 11. Houston at 12. Cincinnati at 13. And West Virginia bringing it up the rear at 14. Ted, let's start with the Sooners. Picked third, received 4 first-place votes. Coming off of a 6-7 season, I mean, kind of tells you about the respect that this program still has, right, in the eyes of the media.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like last year wasn't good. You can understand some of the issues that they had with some transition, with some turmoil. Things have been more solid throughout this year. They've improved their roster in some spots. You know the history of the program, how many times they've won the Big 12. It's like the all-time hedge, right? Like you don't know where to put them, but man, you look at the history, you better put them pretty high.
That's definitely how it feels. And then this is something we've talked a lot about. The schedule is extremely manageable. I mean, you look at the preseason poll. Sooners only played 2 teams in the top 6 of the poll. And Texas is a neutral site game there in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl. And TCU has to come to Norman on Black Friday. I don't know how many times we could say it, but you cannot ask for a much better schedule than that. You just can't. It lines up well for Oklahoma in 2023. And I think that's going back to the history. And I do think a lot of people still believe in Brent Venables as a head coach. But that schedule, that's got to be a really, really influential reason in why OU's checking in at number 3.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I think I'm not suggesting that people don't know or forgot, but I don't think they factored in, because we've been now for a decade, a conference that plays every single team every year, right? This is the first year that's not the case. And that changes things sometimes dramatically. And like the team that's number 1, Texas, probably has the most difficult schedule of anyone in the conference, right? It's tough. Totally different than the 3rd team, OU, that has the easiest schedule. I think whenever they ranked the schedules in the Big 12, Oklahoma had the 14th toughest schedule. That is significant when it comes to picking who your champion's going to be. Right? My pick, because of schedule, is, I mean, not just because of that, but there's a big factor in there. I have Kansas State and Oklahoma playing in the Big 12 championship.
How I voted it. Now, I had K-State number 1 on my ballot, which I may or may not have forgotten to send in. Whoops. But I've done this. I did it with Oklahoma. I've done it in the past. Like I give a lot of respect to who won it a year ago. Mm-hmm. Right. And I've got all the respect in the world for Chris Kleiman and a ton of respect for Will Howard and how he played a year ago. I think that defense, they've really settled into that 3-3-5. And I think it's very, very significant when you're bringing your entire offensive line back. Guys that have played a lot of football. So I'm giving K-State that respect. But yeah, that's what I have too. I expect Oklahoma and Kansas State to play for a Big 12 championship. Now, will it end up working out that way? I got no clue. Like I have no idea. But it's just going into it. When you look at Oklahoma's schedule, you look at how they've updated the roster. That's how I see it going as of now. Now, injuries, circumstances like those can change and could change even before the season, like how we evaluate these teams. But Texas, the favorite, man, first time since 2009, which is kind of hard to believe that they are the preseason media poll favorite. I I guess it's got everything to do with the talent on the roster, right?
I guess the talent on the roster's no different than it was a year ago. In fact, it's probably worse than it was a year ago.
They don't have Bijan Robinson. They don't have a lot of key pieces of that defense that played a lot of football for them. But
guys get better. There's improvement. I expect Quinn Ewers to be better. He was middle of the road in the conference last year's quarterback. Statistically, like he had some nice moments, but he's middle of the road guy in the conference last year. I expect him to be much better. Heisman candidate? I'm not going that far, but I expect him to be much better.
Yeah, and I just don't think there's any denying that they have a talented roster, right? I think Sarkisian's done a good job, especially he's done along the offensive line. They're starting to stack some talent on some really highly recruited guys, right? Whatever they're doing from an NIL perspective, it's working, right? I mean, it absolutely is. I believe there's a lot of people that expect that offensive line who was starting a couple really young guys a year ago for those guys to make some big leaps, right? And we'll see if they make those or not. Kelvin Banks, that's certainly a guy. I agree with everyone. I expect him to take it up a level in his sophomore season, but I keep going to the back to the fact that they've got one double-digit win season in the last 13 years, and Steve Sarkisian's never won 10 games as a head coach. I keep going back to that. So I didn't have him as my favorite. I didn't have him in the top two. I had him at 3. And it had a lot to do. I think that offense is going to be legit. I'll be surprised if it's not, right? With all the weapons that they have at the skill positions and with Sarkisian pulling the strings offensively. Like the guy's good. But that defense, I just couldn't get past the question marks I have for that defense. I couldn't put them in the top 2, and it could have a lot to do with my OU bias. I don't know, but I'm said it a lot. Just going to need to see it before I give them that respect.
You can call it OU bias, or you can call it Big 12 bias. You know, I guess I'm shocked at how many people voted them number 1. I guess I'm not shocked that they are number 1. I'm shocked at by how much. You got to make someone like Texas earn it. They have a good roster. That's never changed. As long as I've been involved in the sport, 20 plus years, Texas has always had a good roster. Now, the composition of that roster has changed throughout the years, and sometimes they're defensively stacked, sometimes they're offensively stacked, sometimes they're skill position stacked, sometimes they're line of scrimmage stacked. I think they're more balanced now roster-wise than they've been in the recent past, and I think that's a good thing for them. But the roster has never really been the main issue. The main issue at Texas has always been culture. How do you get the roster to play like they're supposed to? And like one of the problems with Texas is they've never handled success well. Like some people say that Texas is going to go down and beat Alabama and Tuscaloosa. I'm not one of those people, but I will say that if you've watched Texas, that could possibly be the worst thing that could happen to them for the entire season. They do not handle success well. They do not handle preseason accolades and preseason hype well. that's the big thing. If Sarkisian has changed the culture around that problem, Texas could go win the Big 12. If he hasn't, then I imagine it's going to be the same 7-5 type of season that we've seen from him.
I'm going to get to interview Sark at Big 12 Media Day, and that's going to be one of the first things we ask him. How are you handling the expectations? Right? And I'm very interested to see what he has to say. I got to imagine one of the first things he's going to say is, hey, we were an 8-win football team a year ago. It doesn't matter. We won 8 games a year ago. So these guys, if they want to look at being voted preseason number 1 in the Big 12, means nothing. But like you mentioned,
they will look at it. That's the thing, though. They will.
They will look at it. They'll look at it. And what they get, 41 of the first place votes? Mm-hmm. So, which was
a lot of those preseason magazines. Now, this is different. Some of those magazines have them as like the number one, every single position group, like the number one spot all the way across the board. It's crazy.
Yeah. So we'll see what it looks like for the Longhorns, but the expectations are high, and it's going to be interesting to see how they handle those and what it looks like. But when you look at the rest of the preseason poll, does anything really jump out to you in the rankings?
Well, BYU, Houston, Cincinnati being at the very bottom of the poll. It's not that I disagree with it. I just think that we just don't know anything about them. You know, we don't know anything about them. Cincinnati is the team that I think most people are the most familiar with, but you look at Cincinnati and you're like, well, they lost their coach that got them to where they are. You know, what's left on that roster? It's hard to pick where those teams are going to stack up. So I guess I can't really blame, people for voting them there. I'll tell you what I think is interesting. I think Tech is surprisingly high. And
how are you surprised by that? I told you the Texas Tech hype train is coming.
Well, I guess I'm not surprised by the hype because I've heard all of the hype. I just, like, if I was to pick a team that doesn't, like if we have the poll at the end, or like the standings at the end, I think Texas Tech is, well, Texas too, but Tech is one of those teams that's most likely to fall. And if I'm looking at teams that's most likely to game, Iowa State at 10 and Oklahoma State at 7.
I'm with you with Oklahoma State.
I feel like Oklahoma State's the wild card team. Just like, and I don't even have a reason. I can't tell you why. I don't know why.
I can tell you why. Mike Gundy's a damn good football coach.
He's the best. He's one of the best I've ever seen at morphing his team into what best fits their roster.
And I think he's won 7 or more games 17 years in a row. I think that's right. And similar to what we said about Oklahoma's schedule, you want to take a guess who the only team that plays every team in the bottom 7 of the preseason poll is?
State.
It's Oklahoma State. When you look at the preseason poll, they have the easiest schedule, in my opinion. They have every team in the bottom 7 on their conference schedule, and they get their rival in Stillwater.
And their non-conference is easy too. I guess what Arizona State is their.
That's their big one. Yeah.
Yeah.
They've got a logo. I'm not entirely sure what it is in their opener. Then they've got Arizona State, and I believe this is South Alabama. This is all you need to know. 2 of the 3 logos in their non-conference, I'm not entirely sure what they are. So that's where they're at with their non-con schedule.
And they got a quarterback that if he stays healthy, he's a baller. He's a gamer. We saw him out dueling Kyler Murray for a stretch in wait, was that what year am I thinking whenever we were down at Tech and he was lighting it up in the
In
first half?
the didn't was it Buzzy that deflated his lung? Is that right?
Maybe.
And he was playing well too. Like it was one of those, it could be a long night if he continues to play that way.
That couldn't have been 2018. That's so long ago.
It's 2018. I'm
That's
looking at it
nuts.
right now.
Isn't
Alan
that
Bowman
crazy?
exits game versus Oklahoma, being evaluated for partially collapsed lung, November 3rd, 2018. Yeah, so Kyler.
He was young and he was lighting it up. He can run around. He can make throws from the pocket. Big, strong arm. Bit of a gunslinger. Fascinated to see what they do with him.
Yeah, and Nardo comes in with, like, what's that defense going to look like? Oklahoma State is an absolute wild card, man. There's no doubt about it. But Iowa State's got a hard schedule. I think 6 teams on their conference schedule are in the top 7 of the preseason poll, but defense is going to be good. You're going to have a chance in a lot of games. It's going to, and this is something that Matt Campbell talks a lot about. It's going to come down to the margins for them. It always does. Turnovers, the hidden yardage, special teams, which for a guy that's considered a great coach, they have not been good on special teams. So it's an interesting year in Ames, though. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. But anytime you're going to have possibly the best defense in the league, going to have a chance in a lot of games. I bet a lot of coin flip games for the Cyclones, and they had that a year ago, and it did not go well for them.
Yeah. Well, they had the best defense in the conference and the worst offense in the conference. If I still expect them to have the best defense in the conference, if their offense can find a way to be middle of the road, got yourself a really dangerous football team. Iowa State is a team that you could see at the end of the year. They beat the Big 12 champion on the road and lost to the last place Big 12 team at home. Like, that's the type of, and everyone else in between is going to be a 1-score game. I mean, that's how it was last year. So that I fully expect that to be the same, but they're just kind of a wild card for me. Anytime you think a team's going to have the best defense in the conference, like you have to say that there's a chance that they could put together a really good season, right?
Yeah. And also TCU, they're 5th in the preseason poll. I really have no idea. Was last year kind of I don't want to say a fluke, but where the stars just all aligned perfectly, right? Or is Sonny Dykes that good? Does all the guys they lost offensively and defensively, does it really not matter that much? Like, have they filled those gaps with talented guys? Right, they've done a really good job on the portal. Bryles coming in as offensive coordinator. And Chandler Morris, you and I, we are big fans of what he can do on the field. Part of me wonders, like, are people sleeping on TCU and they're just going to be really good again? I don't know.
I don't either.
But I'm pretty confident in saying this. When you have a season like they had in 2022, right? Even though they lost the Big 12 championship game and they got just absolutely destroyed in the title game, you go win a CFP game, you go through those experiences. It's got to change the way every guy in that building carries themselves every single day. Right? Like, hey, we're those dudes, right? We went and won a college football playoff game. Like, we were one of the last 2 teams standing. That I never did that. You did it. I never did that. So I don't know how that can change the culture, the confidence, like just how you carry yourself every single day as a player in that program. And what type of big picture effect does that have? I don't know.
Well, just quickly on that, TCU, they haven't played in a national championship since they've been in the Big 12, but they've had some really, really good seasons. But what has happened is in between those good seasons, there's been some really bad seasons. And I think a lot of that is like just depth. You have like the stars aligned, you got a bunch of really good talent on both sides of the ball, and you're able to put together a really good season. Those guys leave, and then you kind of build back up to that peak again. I don't know if that's going to be the same thing with TCU, but I think that's what's happened to them in the past. The thing is they're better at quarterback than they've been previously. When they would lose a good quarterback, it was like, okay, it's a crapshoot. Is it reasonable to expect that they can be better at quarterback this year than they were a year ago? Like, I know that the year that Max Duggan had was incredible, but you do have to go back and remember that he lost the position battle to Chandler Morris. So, like, I'm not suggesting that Chandler Morris is going to statistically have the same type of year as Max Duggan did last year, because he just doesn't have the same weapons. It's not even going to be, I don't even know if you could say it's close, but like, do they have a better quarterback than they had a year ago?
They have a guy that beat the other guy out.
I know that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's weird to say that, but
I would be surprised, right? And it's nothing against Chandler Morris. Duggan was just on a heater a season ago.
Yeah.
Just a special season, right? It had you mentioned it, had really good weapons, really good running back in Kendre Miller, a first rounder, wide receiver in Johnston. Like they had some.
With Johnston, you had the 6'6".
He's back.
He's
Williams.
back. But you had the huge tight end.
He's back.
Darius Davis. He's not.
He's not. Tay Barber's gone.
Yeah. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
I'll ask Sonny Dykes at Big 12 Media Day. Is it possible you're better at the skill positions this season? And we'll see what he says. And maybe that will change, or that'll affect one way or another how we feel about TCU offensively. Yeah. Right. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Like, it's because I think some people just expect this big drop off for TCU. And I'm over here going, I'm not so sure.
I think 5 is about where you have to kind of put them, right?
Yeah. And maybe they're right there when it comes to the conversation of playing in a Big 12 championship game. And maybe they are close to 500 in conference play. Like, I'm not sure, but I do think that having the success they had a season ago, it's got to affect the way that everyone in that program feels. It's got to feel that way.
You would think.